What's going on, everybody, and welcome to A Day with Crime. I'm your host, David.
And I'm Geneva.
All right, guys. So today, before we get started, I want to let you guys know if you guys hear fans or air conditioners in the back, we apologize. It is hot in Florida and California right now, and we just cannot do this in a sweatbox, or we will pass out and you will have no host. So what we're going to do today, going to just get to the quick. Geneva and I is very excited because we do have a special guest with us. Before I say who he is, we are doing the first time ever video. So if you are a member of our Facebook group, we're probably going to put this one up so we can see how it goes. Going forward, we'll have certain cases that we'll post there, and the other ones will go to Patreon so you can see what we look like and how it goes when we're actually shooting these things. So our special guest today is none other than another person that looks like me. He's joining us all the way from Connecticut. Give it up for the Navy man himself, Devontae McClam. How you doing, Devontae?
I'm doing okay. The weather's not it's actually pretty beautiful out here. I know you guys talk about weather the beginning of every video, and I'd say mine probably trumps yours. So
Right.
Don't want to hurt any feelings.
Yeah, see, we all can't live in, Connecticut and stuff. So we have Devontae here because of the case that we're going to cover today. This is a very, I would say, controversial case for back in its day. It's also a very important case to African-American history, I will say to everybody's history, and it's going to be dealing with the murder of Emmett Till. In case you guys don't know who he is, I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of that. It may be a little bit longer than usual because for those of you who may not know Emmett Till, which I'm starting to find out that a lot of people don't know who he is. That way you know who he is and what we're going to talk about, and then we'll get into the discussion. So Emmett Louis Till was born July 25th, 1941. Of course, he was lynched after a white woman accused him of whistling at her, which we get more into that as we go along. He was born and raised in Chicago in August 55. He decided to visit some relatives in Money, which is near the Mississippi Delta region. His mother, after he was killed, decided to pretty much have him laid out, which we get more into that because of what actually happened to him. So let's go a little bit into his case. It stated that he spoke to a 21-year-old Carolyn Bryant, the white married proprietor of a small grocery store. Although what happened at the store is a matter of dispute, Till was accused of flirting with or whistling at Bryant. Decades later, Bryant disclosed that in 1955 she had fabricated her testimony, which is the heat of this case. So if what trivially happened to him was because of her account, his uncle's house where he was staying was broken into by her husband and I think his brother and a third man. They drug him out and kidnapped him, rendered his family powerless to do anything. Now, you have to understand that we're talking about Jim Crow laws even back in 1955. Jim Crow laws dealt a lot with oppression, and black people had absolutely no power to do anything of this nature. So they drug him out of his house, and they took him to a shed where they beat him meticulously for hours. After they beat him to death, they tacked him to a wagon wheel and threw him in the bottom of the Mississippi. Kind of hard for me to talk about, which rendered him completely unrecognizable. A jury of all white peers found these guys to be 100% innocent of that, and they were let go. Subsequent years later, let's get to his funeral. His mother decided to have his body have an open casket. Now, I'll give you links because I'm not going to post the pictures when this website's done this week because they're about that gruesome, but we'll give you links where you can look at them. Believe me, guys, he was bloated. His face was probably about 9-10 times the size it should have been. It was horrible. But his mother decided to have an open casket because she wanted everybody to walk by and state and see what actually happened to her son. She wanted the white people to look and see what hatred did to her son, and something that she didn't believe that he had ever done, because she had always raised him that you never look a white man in the face, you keep your head down, you say yes, sir, and no, sir. So subsequent years later, his mother decided that there was going to be a little bit of a lawsuit, which we're going to discuss about that. So that's a little bit of synopsis. I want to get into the discussion, so I don't give too much away. So let's start with our special guest, Devontae. Being that you know this case very well, you know, in your earlier years in grade school, you wrote a whole report on this. It's been a lot of years later since you did that and that we've talked about this case. What is your thoughts on the Emmett Till case right now with what I just read in the synopsis?
Without getting any any further into the specific details, because I want to leave some stuff for later to talk about. I think it's really hard to take a case this complicated and move it into a time where we think with free minds. So like it's really hard to think from their perspective to see why they would or would not say certain things. So I just encourage people to open their minds to it. Like you said, there was a time in school where I was very unfocused and I was very unwilling to do work, and I was just in that stage of my earlier teen years. And this book report, which was assigned to me, it wasn't my choice, but when it was assigned to me, I became almost addicted to the case to the extent to where, I mean, it's probably the best report I've ever written, and I was very young and hadn't even gotten into high school yet. So like I say, I don't want to get into too much of what I feel about it right now, just because I don't want too much emotion to start pouring out. But over the next however long this podcast will be, you'll get more into how exactly I feel. But like I say, just keep your minds open. It's really easy to get emotional and to say how much things suck now or how much it sucked back then. But you got to open your mind up a little bit just to understand that it was a completely different time frame.
All right, Geneva, what's your take on the Emmett Till case out the gate?
Honestly, I 100% agree with Devontae. Like, you do have to realize that this was a different time. That 100% does not make what happened to Emmett Till okay or excusable. It's absolutely heartbreaking to me that a white woman could lie on a black boy, man, whatever, a black person, or a white person could lie on a black person then and automatically be believed. So I mean, it's completely heartbreaking that this even happened at all, much less that years and years later she admitted that all of it was a lie, which means that really he died for no reason. But when you admit that you lied about it, then he really died for no reason. So just to me, the whole case, it's heartbreaking and it's sad. And like Devontae said, like, you do have to keep your mind open, and you do have to understand that it's, you know, that when this happened, it wasn't 2018. You know what I mean? It was a long time ago when there was still, you know, segregation and things like that.
And I do want to say, before we get real deep into this is a racially charged case. There's no way around it because of how the murder is. So I don't want anybody to think that we're trying to take sides because we're African Americans. It is definitely a case that I feel like that didn't only shape the way African Americans' lives are going, but it shaped everybody's life in that. So let's talk a little bit about 1955. You know, now neither one of us three was around, but you know, my mother was. You know, she was through the era of marching with Martin Luther King. She lived through all of the 50s and all this segregation. And you know, we complain now if we have to go into a courtroom, especially African Americans, and we are faced with a jury of our peers. Back then, why would they call it that? Because the jury of your peers was going to be white regardless, okay? In his case, like you said, it didn't take much for anybody, whether or not you were brown, orange, or pink. If a white person said you did it, you were automatically found guilty, which in that era led to a lot of unnecessary murders and unnecessary lynchings back then. So let's talk about that time and era. Being 2018, being the president that we have in place now, being that we actually just came out of an era where we had an African-American president, do you feel that cases like these, like Emmett Till, still happen, maybe down in the South, maybe places we don't know? And if you do feel that way, why is that? Devontae, what's your take on that?
I mean, I know for sure they still happen. Actually, not this. I don't think they happened this maliciously. But my wife was just telling me about a case because I was talking to her about the Emmett Till podcast, and she was telling me about something that happened. I don't want to say the state because I'll probably get it wrong, but it was something that happened somewhere. I want to say, I don't know, but it happened somewhere. It was like 2 people got lynched, and it's in a very big way. It feels like the world's moving backwards, just because. The things that happen now, they happen in secret, but when it happens, it's like, whoa, that kind of thing is still going on. And it's hard to believe sometimes. It's a lot more political nowadays because people, white or black, you have to be smart about it, about how you're going about these hate crimes and whatnot. So I for sure think it still goes on today. If it happens this maliciously, it's definitely happening in secret. But I know like the lynchings and killings and so on and so forth. It's still happening, and I do believe there's racist intent behind a lot of them. So,
okay, Geneva, what you gotta say about that?
Yeah, I mean, just going off what Devontae said, I definitely think that things like this still happen. I don't think that it is maybe to the extreme that the Emmett Till case was, but I mean, there are still racially driven murders, you know what I'm saying? There are still lynchings, there are still things that happen that are racially charged. I mean, just look at the what was it, a church shooting, I think. Right. It would have been a few years ago now, but I mean, it was a white man that went in and shot up a black church just because he didn't like black people, whatever. And I think like Devontae said, it is probably a lot of it is done more in secret. We don't. I don't think that we hear about all. Actually, I know we don't hear about all of them that happen. But it is a lot. I think a lot of it at this point in 2018, it is, not only racially charged but also politically charged. There is still racism, unfortunately, even in 2018. But while I think things like this happen, I don't think that they happen to the extreme that the Emmett Till case did.
No, I asked that because what I want to do with you guys right now in this discussion, so we can give the listeners a little bit more in-depth view of exactly what happened to him, is I kind of want to break his case down a little by little. We're going to talk about actually what happened to him, how it happened to him. I'm going to try not to be very graphic with it. So if it starts getting too graphic for some of you guys, you have kids in the room, maybe remove them. But we are trying to do this as non-graphic as possible because I feel like it's a case that every generation should hear. So let's kind of start what happened, because doing this also, which I didn't put in my synopsis, is, not only was he beaten, but he was lynched at one point too doing all of this. So let's just go step by step. So when Roy Bryant was informed of what happened, he aggressively questioned several young black men who entered the store. Bryant, with a black man named J.W. Washington, approached a black teenager walking along a road. Bryant ordered Washington to seize the boy, put him in the back of a pickup truck, and took him to be identified by a companion of Carolyn's who had witnessed the episode with Till. Friends or parents vouched for the boy in Bryant's store, and Carolyn's companion denied that the boy Bryant and Washington seized was the one who had accosted her. Somehow, Bryant learned that the boy in the incident was from Chicago and was staying with Mose Wright, which was his uncle. Several witnesses overheard Bryant and his 36-year-old half-brother John William J.W. Millam discussing taking Till from his house. Now, the part of that I want to talk about right now is, if you just heard me say several witnesses had told these two gentlemen that Emmett Till and his companions was not the boy that had accosted Carolyn, even though Carolyn said that it was.
It was.
So, first question is, now we know that there's other people who was also white who said, no, you got the wrong boy, it wasn't him. But going off of Carolyn's word, they found out where he lived and they thought about going to get him. How does that make you feel right now? Because it makes me feel kind of angry, right, that because the color of his skin at this point, everybody's just disregarding that because this man is upset that this happened to his wife. What's your thought on that, Devontae?
I honestly don't think, based off of all the research that I did when I was in school and the research that I've redone now, just to touch up on it, I honestly don't think Roy Bryant was mad at all. Roy Bryant was an abusive man. He wasn't. He mean, he was prone to anger. He was angry all the time. So I think she came home one day and she wanted a reason to conversate. She just wanted to maybe she didn't have negative intent, but unfortunately it had to turn into negative intent at some point because she had to keep the story going at trial and whatnot. So yeah, it makes me feel upset, but I honestly think I think that she just wanted a reason to connect and wanted to get some emotion out of her husband, and he wanted to make a point. Like he bored with work life or whatever the case may be. This kind of thing was not acceptable, but it was common. It was normal for there to be just another lynching or another African American person that had gone missing. So he wanted. I feel like he just made a phone call or rode his horse or however exactly it was that they communicated back then. But I honestly think he just hit up his brother and whoever it was. I could not find out who the third man was, but he hit up his brother and just like, hey, you want to go have a good time, or like this was a common thing. Like throughout the court case and everything that you when you do the research, these men didn't seem afflicted. Like this was something normally that was done. It's just the chain of events that had happened in this case specifically, the way that it broke down, it ended up being a bigger deal than all the other times, if those were times that happened, which I would suspect that they were.
Now, in all fairness,
yeah, I'm definitely upset about it.
Now, in all fairness to Carolyn, before I go to Geneva, here's a question that's been on my mind about this as I research this case. Do you think that it's possible that maybe that night, being that we know, right, that Ward was an abusive man, I've lived in that situation before, do you think that maybe it is possible that Carolyn just said, a nice young black man came into the store today and he just said hi, and somehow that turned into whistling and flirting, and because he's already an angry man as it is, this gave him a reason to go after somebody? Do you think that that's possible, that could be a situation that could happen?
There's a lot that has made me try to put myself in Carolyn's shoes and just kind of push the anger and whatnot to the side. And what I think about is that in the research that I've done, you think about there's 7 boys. They just gotten done picking cotton at the field, and they drove their truck down to the store, and they went in two or three at a time. So 7. That's 3 visits from African American boys, all back to back. So I'm thinking she was alone in the store. She had been left alone in the store because Roy and them had taken off. So maybe she was a little scared. And when it's hard for me to think that way about this kind of thing, because it's when I walk down the street and I see somebody, not race or gender, but when I see somebody that looks threatening, I deal with them a different way than I would deal with somebody that doesn't look as threatening. So what I'm thinking is that maybe there was something that made her feel like maybe she was in danger, that made her be more cautious and think more about it. Because when she gets home and even if it's just to strike up a conversation or whatever it is, something happened that made her think more about these events than every other event that took place in that day. So it pains me to think, or it pains me to try to be on her side. But in all fairness, and trying to explore all avenues of the case, I forced myself to, and I could see a few situations where 2 by 2, there's African American people who are known to hate the Caucasian race because they're enslaved by them, going into this store, and you're in the store by yourself. So I can see that creating a situation mentally. No excuse for it, even still. Like I said, I'm completely against her and the actions that she chose to took. But I can see I can make up a few situations in my head where I can feel like at least some sort of negative emotion was felt by the way that things had gone down.
Geneva, what's your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I also did a school report in the past on Emmett Till. I was older than Devontae was when he did his. I was actually in high school when I did mine. But definitely I feel like she felt threatened somehow. So even if these boys just walked in 2 or 3 at a time, 3 different visits, by 2 or 3 of these young black men at a time, I mean, as a woman, I could put myself in her shoes to say maybe the fact that she was in that store by herself, the fact that they were coming in 2 or 3 at a time, which means that if something was to happen to her, they could easily overpower her. 1 woman, 2, 3 men. You know what I mean? So I do think it's very possible that something about those boys may have been intimidating to her. It may have been scary to her. As far as fingering Emmett Till, before we found out that she lied about who she claimed or thought had catcalled her or said something to her or accosted her or whatever, before we found out that she had lied, my initial thought was maybe she just confused Emmett Till with these, whatever other boy did this to her. You know what I mean? Because I know it's stereotypical to think, she just got the wrong black man. That's very, you know what I mean? That's a very stereotypical thing, that all black people look alike, that kind of a thing. But if you are scared, in that moment, it is possible for you to not remember details or whatever. So I do feel like something about the encounter with the boys probably did intimidate. I mean, like Devontae said, it could have been simply a situation of her trying to get some kind of a reaction or an emotional response from her husband, and she just didn't think that it would go the way that it went. You know what I mean? She didn't think that he would go trying to find somebody, find the person that she said. Or like you said, Dad, it could have just simply been that she said, oh, there were some, black guys that came in today from the fields, and, they were really nice, and they just said hi to me and got their sodas or whatever, candy, whatever they bought back then, to take and leave, and that he took that as, well, who was it? And what did they say? And what happened? You know what I mean? It's easy for a situation like that to blow up quickly. Like Devontae said, that's no excuse. And I'm not excusing her for lying. I'm not excusing her for claiming that Emmett Till did something to her that he didn't. But I can understand why or how it could have gone the way that it did.
And now we're going to talk a lot. I know you guys are hearing a lot about Carolyn Bryant lying. We will get deeper into that as we go along. The other thing that I want to point out in that piece we just talked about is this too. Everybody who, especially younger people who wasn't around in that era, or even in the 70s, understand that white people was taught to fear black people. And it wasn't that Emmett Till was a small boy. He was a striking young man. He was muscled. He was chiseled. I mean, he looked a lot like Devontae looks right now, right? So if you're taught to fear somebody, like you said, Geneva, and they're big and they're walking in, maybe it did spark some kind some emotion in her that she was scared, because they're trained that way. And that's what they're taught, that we were virtually outcast, we were bad people, and we were there to do bad things. Let's move on to the second part of that, which becomes more important than what happened to him. So in the early morning hours between 2 and 3:30 a.m., on August 28, 1955, Bryant, Milam, and Bryant's wife drove to Mose Wright's house. Milam was armed with a pistol and a flashlight. He asked Wright if he had 3 boys in the house from Chicago. Till was sharing a bed with another cousin. There were 8 people in the small 2-bedroom cabin. Milam asked Wright to take them to, take them to the nigger who did the talking. Till's great aunt offered the men money, but Milam refused as he rushed Emmett to put on his clothes. Moses Wright informed the men that Till was from up north and didn't know any better. Milam reportedly then asked, "How old are you, preacher?" To which Wright responded, 64. Milam threatened that if Wright told anybody he wouldn't live to see 65. The men marched Till out to the truck and asked Carolyn Bryant whether this was the young man who had accosted her, and she said that he was. So here's what I want to spark in this particular segment now that we heard that. Let's talk about back in those days how basically because of the rights that African Americans didn't have, his uncle and aunt was powerless to do anything. I don't want people to feel like that they just marched in his house and they could have pulled out some shotguns and started shooting people, because it very was much not like that. Back then, black people was taught, if you see a white man as yes or no sir, you drop your head. You don't argue. You give them what they want. If they would have went there and just shot up the whole house, the white man would have got away with that at that point because of the era and the time that it was. So the part of the discussion I'm trying to drive this to is, how do we feel about the fact that, you know, they rushed in and took this boy out knowing that they could do it because there was nobody that was going to be there to stop them? What do you think that Mose Wright and his aunt felt at that point in time, and the other cousins, when Emmett Till was getting drug out? Geneva, I'll start with you on this one. What do you think they felt, the horror they felt, what's going through their mind at this point?
I think, like you said, they felt completely powerless. What were they going to do? You know what I mean? Like has been said a few times already, when this took place, this was not, this wasn't even the 1990s. You know what I mean? This wasn't even, this was not a time when black people really had any rights. Like there was nothing that they could have done. They couldn't have said, "You're trespassing, get out." You know what I mean? Like now, if a white person decides to barge themselves through my door, and I know this is very racially charged, so I'm just gonna apologize for that now, but I mean, there's no way to get around it. You know what I mean? If a black man barges through my door right now, I can say, if you do not leave, I'm calling the cops. You know what I mean? Like, you need to get out or I'm calling the law. Like, you can't just be in my house. But back then, that wasn't really an option. You know what I mean? Their law enforcement was white. So the people that we would call now to help us, for them, were, for all intents and purposes, against them, and were more than likely their enemy. You know what I mean? Well, so if they called the police, you know, even if they didn't take it into their own hands, but they just picked up the phone, or however they did it back then, like Devontae said, maybe they jumped on a horse or whatever and ran to the, down to the police station. The police that they're going to be talking to are white men. They might say, well, what do you want me to do about it? You know what I mean? So there wasn't anything they could do. They had to stay. For fear of getting themselves hurt or killed, they had to stand there and just let these white men do what they were going to do and hope that Emmett Till came back alive, which unfortunately he did not. So, I don't really feel like, there was anything more that they could do. I don't think that, I think they would have all ended up dead, honestly, if they had tried to fight back.
All right, Devontae, your take on that, bro.
Honestly speaking, I don't know if you knew how to feel. Like, obviously there's the adrenaline rush of being scared, of not knowing what to do, what choice to make, and then a very obvious decision to fight back or to just sit down. And unfortunately, it's just sitting down, and even if you know 100% that this person is going to die, like you got a bigger family to think about, all the other people that are in that house that you're living in, and your future and what your future provides other people and how you can help and so on and so forth. But you got to think about because I forced myself to answer this question myself, maybe in a different context, but in my research process, but you have to think the developmental process of a human being, where I can say personally, I was raised to be respected, but not to force respect. Whereas it's to make your presence known, but don't be rude about it. Like, you don't have to force yourself, so on and so forth. You have these African American individuals never knew what individuality felt like. They never knew what taking a stand felt like. They don't know what having a spine is, because they weren't taught that. They were always taught to listen to the white man, and the white man tells them what to feel. So this person breaks into his house, says, you don't feel anything or you won't live to be 65, and that's that. Like, you sit back, you deal with the fact that what's happening is happening, and try to deal with it better the next day, try to take action the next day. And later on, we'll get into the actual action that he took in court, which is admirable. Because that was his chance to take a stand. But in that moment itself, like, I can say personally, if somebody came in and told me that Sam was going with them and I wouldn't live to see 24 if I said something, I wouldn't be living to see 24. Like, it doesn't matter at that point, because I'm living my life for a bigger purpose.
Right.
Where unfortunately, back in these days, the bigger purpose that you were living your life for wasn't necessarily your children, wasn't necessarily your family. It was a much bigger part of that. Like, everybody's fighting for freedom. Everybody wants fairness among the races. Like, you have to understand that, especially a smart man like Roy, who was indirectly but very intelligent. A million thoughts must have been running through this man's mind, but with the understanding that individuality was not a thing yet for African American people. They didn't know how to be strong. I can't imagine he knew what to do in the moment.
And for me, that's rough, right? I mean, father of 6 kids, got 4 grandkids. You know, it's easy for me to say the same thing right now. If somebody busted in here and they're like, look, we're going to take Jacob and Madison and Beth up out of here right now, you know, you just going to have to take me with them. And it's easy for me to say that now because it's 2018. But being from the history that I've studied, I agree with both of you that, yeah, back then we probably would have just sat down and said, you know, I hope we see you again someday. Wasn't really a lot that we could do. But it also makes me feel now a different way about Carolyn Bryant, because how I feel at this point is this. Okay, even if Geneva is right and she felt scared about these 3 black men coming to the store and she was by herself, she was not by herself that night. Her husband brought her with him and with his brother-in-law, or whoever the guy was, to point out the fact that it was Emmett Till that did it. I felt like at that point in time, she could have said, no, he didn't do what I said he did. But then if we go back to the other side of that coin that Devontae discussed earlier about her husband being an abusive guy, okay, was it a situation where it's going to be either him or me? If I say now that he didn't do it, am I defending a black boy in his eyes, and I'm going to go home and I'm going to be subject to get my butt whipped? So, I mean, there's so many angles you can look at it that way. Still not fair, but there you have it. Let's move on to the other part here. So now, guys, it's going to start to get into a little bit of what happened to him. So it gets a little bit harder. So at this point now, they took him. So now they tied him up. They tied Till up in the back of the green pickup truck and drove toward Money, Mississippi. According to some witnesses, they took Till back to Bryant's groceries to drop off Carolyn Bryant and recruit 2 black men. The men then drove to a barn in Drew. They pistol whipped him on the way and reportedly knocked him unconscious. Willie Reed, who was 18 years old at the time, saw the truck passing by and identified 5 people on the truck, with Till Reed recalling seeing J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant in the front seat, while Henry Lee Loggins and Leroy Too Tight Collins were in the back with Till. Both Loggins and Collins worked for Milam and were allegedly forced to help with the beating. So now you're kidnapping him. You're going to kill him pretty much because of his crime, but now you're going to recruit 2 people just like him and force them to help beat him. Let's go on because this all ties in. Willie Reed said that while walking home, he heard the beating and crying from the barn. He told a neighbor, and they both walked back up the road to a water well near the barn, where they were approached by Milam. Milam asked if they had heard anything, and Reed responded no. Others passed by the shed and heard yelling. A local neighbor also spotted Leroy Too Tight Collins at the back of the barn, washing blood off the truck, and noticed Till's boot. Milam explained he had killed a deer and that the boot belonged to him. Okay, so now we did have people concerned, but Milam lied. He has these 2 black boys he recruited to help pretty much kill him. Do you think that was something because he needed the help? Or maybe if push came to shove and by some stroke of luck and miracle, they had a jury that was going to be sympathetic to the Emmett Till side of things, that they can say, well, we didn't do it, but these 2 black boys did it, and here's proof. What do you got? What do you sit on that, Devontae? What do you think that his possible thinking was?
I don't think there was a plan in itself. Like even the most intelligent of people, when adrenaline is in their system, they're angry. You're not thinking 25 steps ahead. Even me, myself, who I'm known to think far ahead into the future and set big goals so that I can reach them and how to get there and whatnot. If I get angry, all that goes out the window. That's how crimes are committed, is when people get mad and they are desperate for money, but they have a plan to get the money, but they feel like they need it now, so they go rob that store type thing. I think honestly, it's let's give a couple African American individuals a chance to rise up. It's not necessarily rise up, but like you can, like they can hold that coin against them forever. Like you do whatever I say or blah 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 blah. And honestly, it wouldn't have been hard just putting myself into that position if I was the man recruited to help wash this person's blood, especially if I did not know him. I'm growing up in the 1950s where racism is huge. White people have power, black people have none. And two white men come up to me in a very friendly manner, I imagine, because I don't imagine this would have gone any other way, and say, hey, you want to help me kill this black guy? And who is he? Oh, Emmett Till. Oh, I don't know that guy. Yeah, let's go. Because they get an opportunity to feel the power that they've been suppressed under for so long. It wouldn't be hard to say yes. And like for me, for instance, being in the Navy, I'm enlisted. All right, and there's a rank structure. There's enlisted and there's officers, and officers are above the enlisted. We have to salute the officers whenever we see them outside, so on and so forth. And I strive to be an officer, and I tell myself that I will be an officer at some point. If somebody came up to me right now and said, I'm going to let you be officer for 5 days. You can wear the rank, you can receive the pay, everything that an officer does in that day, you will do. Do you want to do it? I would say yes. I don't see any foreseeable consequences. I mean, yes, I'm experiencing a rank that's above mine, and I'll have to go back, which is going to suck, but I don't see any negatives to it, and I don't see how two African-American men who don't know this person, or maybe possibly know, I don't know if they knew him or not, but especially if they didn't know him, it's like I don't see, like, being in their shoes, two white men come up and ask, and in my head, my first thoughts are, what are the consequences? There's none. These are white men. They're angels. They can do whatever they want to. So these men are providing me an opportunity to come up, and maybe something will improve in my life, and I get to feel like the white man for a day, type deal. And then that would be extremely hard to say no to.
Right. Geneva, what's your thought pattern on that one?
I 100% agree with everything he said. I don't think that there was a plan when it came to this murder. I just don't, because like Devontae said, it's the I need money now, so I'm gonna go rob this store, I'm gonna go rob this bank mentality. There's no plan. You know what I'm saying? It's just, I need to do this in order to achieve this, and that's it. There's no thinking, there's no plan. And for all we know, he saw these two black men, boys, whatever, on the side of the road and said, well, maybe they could help us out real quick to do this. Now, it is possible that he thought after finding them or recruiting them or whatever, that if it came down to it, he could, they could use them as the scapegoats. You know what I'm saying? And probably most definitely be believed if they said, well, we didn't do this. You know what I'm saying? These two did it. This is how we know they did it. Maybe we were there when they did it, but we didn't actually do anything. You know what I mean? So like Devontae said, when you get that opportunity to be more powerful than you are, especially when you've been suppressed, you know what I mean? And forcibly suppressed at that, you're going to take that opportunity, even if it's only for long enough to kill somebody. You know what I mean? Even if it's only for that hour or 30 minutes or however long it takes for you to do what you need to do in order to feel that power, you'll remember feeling that power even after you're back to where you started out. So no, I don't necessarily think that there was a plan, and I don't think that he necessarily thought, at least not when he asked them to do it, that he could use them as a scapegoat. But I do think it's possible that after the fact, you know what I mean, when they were in the trial and everything like that, I'm sure that after the fact, that probably went through his mind.
And I think go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm 100% certain there was no plan here because there's too many holes. There's too many things that went wrong. These are if this case would have taken place now, there's no way. It would be without a doubt, because even if the jury decided one thing, the community would have too much of an impact on the white folk or whoever it is that's in power in that situation for it to happen. But You have to think. So when you and everybody's done something bad in their life. I've taken cookies. I took a bunch of ramen from you in your David Sunseeds, and you absolutely just came down on me like a hammer because I had your 2-gallon thing of David Sunseeds. Now, when I took those David Sunseeds, I'm thinking, man, I really want some seeds, right? And there's always stages to depression. And this is how I think about crimes as well. There's stages to that crime. So I have the immediate, the want. I want that David Sunseed package. So I take it and I put it in my room. And I'm sitting there lunching for like a day, right? There's 2 gallons of seeds. It's going to take me a second to get through it. And then I start piling up seed shells, right? And so there's a pile of seed shells in the corner, and I'm burying them behind my bed exactly where you found them. And I get about a third of the way down, and I'm like, man, there's still enough seeds for me to get away with this if I just put them back. And this is the stage that I feel like that maybe that they decided, but they felt remorse for what they did, and maybe they drove by those 2 black people, and they're like, here's a chance, right? These guys have seen us. They know what we're doing, or we gave too much away. They know too much. I gotta bring them in on it. If I don't bring them in on it, something's gonna go wrong, because they're in that stage of mind where it's like, crap, we might not be able to do this, right? Because there's always that immediate feeling after the accomplishment that you may not get away with it, and then eventually you get past that feeling, and it's a fight or flight. You're either going to do it or it's not going to happen. And I believe that stage of processing mentally happened when they got to the barn and they decided to start pistol whipping him. But so you're in that state of mind where it's like, oh, we might not get away with it. What's a way out? What's a way out? And they see these 2 African American men, and they're like, oh man, we're going down. We got to do something. So and rather than kill them or do what they did later on with Willie Reed and Fred and and I 100% admire Willie Reed for what he does later on. But rather than do that, because they haven't developed that confidence yet. They haven't developed the confidence to threaten, to say you're going to do this or you're going to do that to random people because they expected to encounter Roy. They knew that they were going to get to him. But these 2 random people, they had no idea. But they're African American. I can give them a chance to keep their mouth shut. Right. So in that state of mind.
And then on top of that, it may look a little less suspicious, right? That you see these 2 white dudes with 1 black boy versus 3, right? And so 2 lives and goes back home, and so maybe nobody casts. Well, the 3rd one just ran away. Maybe they get away with that for a while because you were seen with more than just 1. So years later, an interview with Henry Lee Loggins' son, who's the mayor, Johnny B. Thomas, revealed that Till was shot and tossed over the Black Bayou Ridge in Glendora, Mississippi, near the Tallahatchie River. The group drove back to Roy Bryant's home in Money, where they reportedly buried Emmett's clothes. Now, this is going to make you a little bit upset. There's a direct quote from J.W. Meelam that was put in Look magazine in 1956. I said it once because the impact had to be said, but I am now going to say the bad word. I'm going to put in there because he used it a couple times in this interview. But he says, well, what else could we do? He was hopeless. I'm no bully. I never heard an end in my life. I like ends in their place. I know how to work them. But I just decided it was time a few people got put on notice. As long as I live and could do anything about it, ends are going to stay in their place. Ends ain't going to vote where I live. If they did, they control the government. They ain't going to go to school with my kids. And when an end gets close to mentoring or to mentioning sex with a white woman, he's tired of living. I'm likely to kill him. Me and my folks fought for this country, and we got some rights. I stood there in that shed and listened to that end throw that poison at me, and I just made up my mind. Chicago boy, I said, I'm tired of them sending your kind down here to stir up trouble. GD, you, I'm going to make an example of you just so everybody can know how me and my folks stand. J.W. Meelam, Look magazine, 1956. Now, just from that statement alone, and this is for another podcast, but I've had talks with people over why I think slavery existed. And if you did the history, you would agree, but J.W. Meelam just said it. It was because they was afraid of the black man for whatever reason. He just told you, an end is not going to vote in my government because they'll take it over. It's fear. Why is there fear? You know, I've heard throughout the years, fear because we're smarter than them, or it's fear because he wanted their women, or it's fear because of whatever. Goes back to what I've already said. Then if you was afraid that we knew too much, maybe if you decided to work with the African Americans at that time, we would have had a better world, because whatever they knew, they could impart on you, you can impart on them, and we would have a better world. But what do you guys feel about that statement from J.W. McClam coming directly from the man's mouth that did it, yet still acquitted? But now we know that now murder has no, I can't think of the word now. You know what I mean? No statute of limitations. Right. But he came up and just said, yeah, man, I did it to make an example. What do you guys think about that? Do you think they should have went back and jacked him up anyways and put him in jail? We knew that was going to be done. Geneva, what's your thought about that direct quote from J.W. McClam himself?
Well, I think, honestly, for me, like, the part where he says that he likes ends in their place, that says it all. You know what I'm saying? Because, like you said, Dad, there was fear of black men. I mean, in all actuality, because then there was no women's rights. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't think so. Because this would have been even before women could vote, right?
Right.
Okay, so really, like, if you look at it, women were lower than men, but were still higher than black people, right? So black people were the bottom of the totem pole in this scenario. The black people were at the bottom. They were as low as you could go. So if you're saying that you like black people but only in their place, it's like you said, it's the fear. It's, you know, he would easily kill a black person over, or a black man over talking about having the right to vote, or talking about having sex with a white woman. And I mean, in my opinion, he should have been jailed. Obviously, I mean, he committed murder. You know what I'm saying? Like, you commit a murder, you go to prison. That is the natural order of things. However, the only reason that him and his brother got away with this is because they were two white men that killed one black man. You know what I'm saying? So that jury of their peers was very literally a jury of their peers. It was 12 white men that said, oh, well, so this black man, Emmett Till, he went and he did, you know, he committed a crime to them against one of our women. You know what I mean? Like, that's how they looked at it. Oh, well, he deserved what he got. Do I think that they should have, do I think that there should have been a punishment? Absolutely. Because I believe that if these two men had gone and done the same thing to another white man that they did to Emmett Till, they would have been sitting in a prison cell. There wouldn't have been a question, because like Devontae said, there are so many holes in the crime that they carried out that it was quite literally a crime of passion. They got mad. They went and they killed, you know, they murdered Emmett Till in, you know, the worst way possible. And they called it a day. Like, that's how it happened. That there was there was no thought process. It was, he did this. Oh, are you sure that this is the one that did it? Yes. Okay, well, let's go take care of it. That was their thought process. So while I do believe that they should have received a punishment because of the times, they got off with it.
Devontae, your take, bro.
All right, so before I get too into the reason why I think they have to fear black people, I like to state that the whole statement about having sex with a white woman is a person that's no longer willing to live. If you think about the rich community, When you have a lot of money, you have a lot of resources, people want you. You get sponsors, people that are willing to pay for stuff for you. You get valet service for free, expensive hotels, so on and so forth. Those are all luxuries. And if everybody in the world could get the same luxuries that a rich man got, it wouldn't be the same. Because having the money at some point, having all that money is pointless if you can't flaunt it. And I think that is what a white woman was to these people back in the day. Because if you think about it, there was no rich. You were white or you were black. And being white was the position of power. Just about everything a white man could have outside of that power, a black man could have, except for white women. White women were that glass of champagne, that thing that a black man could never enjoy but had to look at. And I think if black men were allowed to have interaction with white women, our racism, the movement that took place after Emmett Till's death, so on and so forth, would have entirely different meanings, because white women would have had to. Even if 70% of all the white women that had relations with African American people had relation or hated them still. They still saw them as lesser. There would be somebody that falls in love. There's still that 30%. And that somebody that falls in love would have nothing but good things to say about that African American individual. He's a hard worker. He should be in office. He should be able to take a spot in government. And now white women are fighting for a black cause. And if white women are fighting for a black cause, there's a problem, because you can't lynch white women. Because then the African American and the white community would band together and turn on the government, which is unacceptable. So I think it was a power play to say something like that, to have the rules set that way back then, because there's white men and there's black men, and men are the overbearing race, and then there's women who are also thought of as lower than white men, who were treated unfairly, and it was terrible for them just as much as it was for African American people in a completely different way. So they had to find a way to keep them apart while still making white women period, while still making women feel lesser than the man. Now, as far as African American people being feared by the Caucasian community, it makes perfect sense to me, because it's the same reason why prison guards fear prisoners if they break out of their cells. There's anger, there's oppression, there's emotion, there's adrenaline. There's too much to stop. Fight or flight isn't an object anymore. It's immediately fight for the people that are inmates, because they have one goal, and that's to get out, especially if you're serving a life sentence. When I was in history class, and I think it was in 10th grade, my history teacher pulled me after class, and he let me know he was super impressed, and I received a reward for it later on, just because of my view on the matter. But the question that he had asked the class, and we had 2 days to answer this question, and then we turned the paper into our teacher, and it wasn't like a win or lose thing, it was just a discussion. But he asked who the most powerful person in government was. Everybody had a response, like the president, the vice president, the council of people that control the president, really.
The Senate.
Yes, Senate.
Senate.
So on and so forth. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Congress.
Right. They would say Congress is what I was looking for. Now, those answers make sense, but the answer that I put down on the paper was the people that control the government, the people that control the world the most, are the people that have no aim, that have no cause, terrorists, people that are willing to lose their lives for a single cause that they have no belief in themselves. They're just told to believe in, because they're the ones that'll make the change. 9/11 shook up the entire world because of people that had no aim. These are people that they put in that they gave testosterone shots, and they gave a reason to believe in something, and they put their whole heart into that something and made them believe that thing was going to be a reality. And these people who had no interest in what the bigger outcome of what the 9/11 act would be, risked their lives and killed themselves for that act. And they changed the entirety of the U.S. Those people are the ones with the power. And in that time, African American people were those people. If they would have given them even the slightest bit of power, the slightest bit, or the slightest opportunity to move into government or anything of that sort, they would have been overrun. And they would have been overrun by people who are blood hungry because of years and years and years and years of abuse and oppression. So that's the reason why you have to fear the black man. So I honestly think in these periods, the Caucasian male was more afraid of African Americans than African Americans were afraid of Caucasians. Because as a white man, you have to fear the possibility of the African American turning against you. As a black man, you're, as long as you listen, you're fine. And that was that. And if you die, it's part of life.
Right.
So what I want to do now, we're moving to the end of this, is I think it's important to let you guys know what did happen to Mose Wright, because I don't want anybody to think that he just said, oh, well, he's gone, that's it. And then we're going to move into the last part of this, which is the funeral and why that is so important, because that is the part that I feel is what made this case to this day still relevant. Whenever you bring up a lynching or a killing, Emmett Till's name always comes up. I live in L.A. I can go to L.A. right now downtown and buy a shirt that says Little Shop of Horrors, and it has a picture of Carolyn Bryant's shop, and on the back is a big picture of Emmett Till and the description of what happened to him. So Mose Wright, just for anybody needs to know, stayed on his front porch for 20 minutes waiting for Till to return. He did not go back to bed that night. He and another man went into money, got gasoline, and drove around trying to find Till, unsuccessfully. They returned home by 8 a.m. After hearing from Wright that he would not call the police because he feared for his life, Curtis Jones placed a call to the Ledford County Sheriff and another to his mother in Chicago. Distraught, she called Emmett's mother, Mamie Till Bradley. Wright and his wife, Elizabeth, drove to Summer, where Elizabeth's brother contacted the sheriff. Now, if you move down further, we already know they went through a trial. They found them completely not guilty of any wrongdoing or anything else. Let me skip down to his actual funeral and his reaction. So lynchings were common back in this time, just to point that out, because it does start with that even though lynchings were racially motivated, this particular case of a 14-year-old black boy that had allegedly whistled at a white woman and been killed for breaching what they call a social caste back then, erupted. Okay, so I don't want everybody to think that all the white people was bad, because they wasn't. The NAACP, which stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, was the first on board, of course, but there's also the White Citizens Council and the Cold War, which are white-owned, that was totally perplexed and shocked by what had happened. His mother ordered that they have his body shipped back to Chicago to be buried. There is no way she was going to let him be buried there where he was killed. He wasn't from there. And she made sure that she stayed in touch with the police and everybody to ensure that they got his body back home. They had to prepare for the funeral. So this is what happened. The A.A. Rayner Funeral Home in Chicago received Till's body. Upon arrival, Bradley insisted on viewing it to make a positive identification, later stating that the stench from it was noticeable 2 blocks away. She decided to have an open casket funeral, saying there was just no way I could describe what was in that box. No way. And I just wanted the world to see. Tens of thousands of people lined the street outside the mortuary to view Till's body, and days later, thousands more attended his funeral at Robert's Temple Church of God in Christ. At that point, all of his pictures was taken, photos online that you see. Dave Chappelle originally did a thing about this in his comedy stand-up, and I totally agree with him, even though he said his mother was gangster. But she wanted everybody to see, this is what happened to my boy. I sent him away, because in the trial, his mother testified that there was no way that Emmett Till did what they said he did, because she had told him, if you run into a white man, you drop your head. If the white man asks you to get on your knees to pay homage to a white man, you do it. So he already was grilled that you cannot compete with the white man in this day and age. You have to do what they tell you to do. Because of that murder, because of that viewing, which I think was the most important thing that could have been done, that one case changed civil rights forever in that point. We look at lynchings a lot different. A lot of different laws was passed. Some of the murders that's taking place now, Trayvon Martin, right? First thing we heard was Emmett Till. What do you guys feel like if you was in Mamie's shoes and, God forbid, one of our kids was in this situation? Would you have done the same thing? What do you feel the importance behind her having that casket open was? Go ahead, Geneva.
her having that casket open was, in my opinion, it was a statement to the world. You know what I'm saying? Because she could have easily listened when they told her that, you know, she needed to close the casket, and it would have been a closed casket. People would have paid their respects, and he would have been buried. That would have been it. You know what I mean? Nobody would remember. Honestly, while people would remember that he was murdered and they would remember what happened, I don't think that the image of what he looked like in that, like the image of him after he was found, I don't think would have been ingrained into people's heads like it is. Because even before I necessarily knew 100% who Emmett Till was, while I had heard the name, the picture, the image of what Emmett Till looked like after his death and after they found him, that is what I thought of when someone said Emmett Till. You know what I mean? Like, now, obviously, years after I originally learned about Emmett Till, and especially in doing research, you know, for a school paper, you see pictures of him while he was alive and he was, you know, happy and whole and everything like that. But I think that if she had gone with having a closed casket, it would have just been the death of another black man by the hands of white men. You know what I mean? I think that the statement that was made with having his casket open is what she was striving for. She wanted people to be able to look so she could say, this is what happened to my child. I don't want this to happen to someone else's child. Because in all reality, everyone is someone's child, brother, father, whatever. You know what I mean? Even if you don't have any family, you were something to someone at some point in your life. And I think that having that casket open was her way of saying, yes, this happened to my child, but I wouldn't want it to happen to someone else's.
Devontae, what's your feelings on that?
It's a very situational question. How do you feel about the open casket funeral of Emmett Till's child? Because in different situations, I would reply different ways. Because in my current state, 2018, my ability to think freely, I'm not a slave, so on and so forth, I would say I hate it. I absolutely despise the fact that decision was made. Because Emmett Till was very much so like me. And I don't say that to try to like pump myself up or anything. I'm just saying that he was a very funny person. He was outgoing. He said some things that were confrontational sometimes. He wasn't afraid to come out of his shell and tell people what was and was not wrong. But you have to understand that Emmett Till came from Chicago, which as far as African American culture at that time went, was a very privileged location. You were allowed to have those self thoughts and so on and so forth. And because of that, I would want, like, if I died right now, I would only hope that my parents and my family would want me to be remembered for the positives of my personality, the fact that I could be funny at times, that maybe more that a more serious attitude was in place, and I was able to get people out of that attitude because of my ability to kind of put things to the side to try to help the situation, so on and so forth. His funny, outgoing personality, his ability to do well in school, so on and so forth. I would want to be remembered for that, not a beaten up face. But on the same coin, with the situation that Emmett Till was in, she was I'm extremely impressed with her ability in this time of oppression, in this time of the black man and woman aren't allowed to think for themselves. I'm extremely impressed with the fact that she was able to make a big decision for a bigger picture and think about the bigger picture when something this emotional was going down. Because she, rather than being selfish and saying, I want my son to be remembered for the outgoing person he was, the exceptional personality he had, she said, I want this casket to be open because of the bigger impact that it's going to make on society from this day forward. And it absolutely did. 100 days after Emmett Till's death was the date that Rosa Parks decided that she was going to be negligent to the fact that a Caucasian man asked her to raise up from her seat. And the next year is when Martin Luther King's house was bombed, and he came out and made a speech to a very, very negative crowd that I would say virtually started the civil rights movement that went on for several years to follow that. This event, because of the fact that she had, and it's the same thing as Geneva said, is that this would have just been another lynching if it wasn't for the fact that that casket was open. And the event in itself gave African American people a spine. They said, and it only started it, which is why it took time to have multiple things like Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, so on and so forth. All those things followed. So some close, some farther after, because it took time for people to understand that they were allowed to protest. It was okay. You might get some slack for it, but it's okay to not agree with the white person. It took time for that to develop. But this event in itself is what gave people okay, you know what, I'm not going to put up with this crap anymore. I have to do something about it. And that feeling pestered and pestered and pestered for years and years to follow until the civil rights movement came to be a thing, and the parade that my grandmother marched in happened, and eventually what brought on the change that is America today, where a black man was in office recently and is being said to be better than presidents of our past, and that would have never been possible if it wasn't, in my opinion, if it wasn't for the event that took place with Emmett Till asking for that casket to stay open.
All right, guys, so we have one more thing I just want to read. We've already kind of talked about it, but we can't leave the audience hanging, and then we're going to wrap this episode up, and that is the whole Carolyn Bryant lie. And I think this kind of covers a couple things that we have already said of why we think maybe she did lie. So in 2017, author Timothy Tyson released details of a 2008 interview with Carolyn Bryant, during which she disclosed that she had fabricated the most sensational part of her testimony. Tyson stated, she said with respect to the physical assault on her or anything menacing or sexual, that part isn't true. She also said nothing that boy did could ever justify what happened to him. The 17-year-old Bryant said she could not remember the rest of the events that occurred between her and Till in the grocery store. Tyson said that Roy Bryant had been verbally abusive toward Carolyn, and it was clear she was frightened of her husband. Bryant described Milam as domineering and brutal and not a kind man. An editorial in the New York Times said, this admission is a reminder of how black lives were sacrificed to white lies in places like Mississippi. It also raises a new question of why no one was brought to justice in the most notorious racially motivated murder of the 20th century, despite an extensive investigation by the FBI. So without going too in-depth in that, I can't just leave it because I'm looking dead at least Geneva's face, and like if she was standing up, she'd be pacing. So here we go. 2008, she admits that she lied. When I read this, I was upset because the first thing I said is, okay, so a black boy got killed for no reason because your butt lied. Further reading that, I kind of felt a little bit sorry for her, only because, as I've said in other podcasts, I have been inside of a relationship that had domestic violence. And I know my mom would not go up against my dad. If he said jump, her next question was how high you want me to jump. But it still can't cover up the fact that we had a boy that was brutally murdered the way that Emmett Till was because of the hatred of that time because she lied. So give this and then give your closing statements on this case. What do you think about the Carolyn Bryant lie? And what's the last things you want to say on the Emmett Till case? We'll start with you, Geneva.
Okay, so I remember when this came out, Dad, because you called me and you said, did you hear about the update in the Emmett Till case? And at that time, I had not heard it. I don't even remember why I hadn't heard it. I don't know if I was working or doing something, but somehow I had not heard this. I'm not a person that listens to the radio, but I do watch the news. So obviously I hadn't been watching the news that day. And like we said, like we said in the beginning, there are multiple reasons that she could have fabricated this lie. You know what I'm saying? She could have felt somehow intimidated by these other boys. She could have been, trying to have small talk with her husband about these boys came in today, and then once she told it, was too afraid to go back on it. But at the same time, it makes me so angry because she comes out in this 2008 interview and says that there was nothing that Emmett Till could have done that would have justified the way his life ended. But yet, if she hadn't said anything, if she had kept her mouth shut, if she hadn't felt the need for whatever her reasoning was to even bring this up to her husband, he wouldn't have died the way that he did. You know what I'm saying? From the moment that lie left her mouth and hit her husband's ears, that boy's life was then in her hands. Do I believe that she, at 70 years old, probably felt remorse for what she said? Yes, because if she didn't, I don't think she would have ever told anyone that she lied. But it definitely does anger me, especially because it was such a senseless lie. So I guess my final thoughts on this case, because we need some humor in here, so I'm just going to reference Jerry Springer. So my final thoughts on this case are that it's completely senseless. And yes, this was at a time when this was the time before the I Have a Dream speech, and this was before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat. And yes, it sparked those things to happen, but it is heartbreaking that a senseless murder was completely unjustified, and there was absolutely no reason for it at all. He did absolutely nothing and was 100% innocent. That is what was the catalyst for sparking everything. So while I don't want to say grateful, but while I have a lot of respect and love for Mamie, and I have a lot of respect and love for the fact that Emmett Till losing his life is what resulted in me being able to have the rights that I do, it also pains me to say that I have respect and love for that. So that's all I got.
All right, Devontae, your take on the Carolyn Bryant lie and your final thoughts on the Emmett Till case.
Man, I need to reply to that on another podcast because. Hey, first of all, when I was doing research on Carolyn Bryant, right? Because this is the only part of the case that I wasn't familiar with. When I heard in 2008 that she told the lie, you called me too. And I did not want to know anything else. I didn't want to know exactly what she said. I didn't want to read an article. She lied. That was it. I was upset with the fact that she lied about it, period. Now, for the purposes of this podcast, for the purposes of the podcast, I went and I researched it, and I went to YouTube and I typed in Carolyn's confession. And I think, and I hate to name names, but CNN, being a news company, right, being as big as they are in the news world, they're on TV and so on and so forth, were extremely insensitive to not notice the fact that when you type Carolyn's confession in on YouTube and their video pops up, the cover photo for their video is a Caucasian male smiling. That was a huge issue to me, and I didn't even watch the video because of that. And that's it. I can't imagine how an organization where African American men and Caucasian men and women work together to make news, to put on the news what is factual and not factual, would miss something that seemingly minuscule but that huge in the same sense. And I can't imagine how many other people have noticed that too. But anyway, back to the question. Like you said, I can't. Initially speaking, when you say it to me, it's I hate you. I cannot stand you. You are where you need to be, wherever that is in the afterlife, wherever you have been decided to go, which I can't imagine is a very great place. But you lived a full life.
Right.
You took a lot. Like you lived she was like 67, wasn't she?
Like 76, I think.
I was gonna say she was real close. She was real close to 80 because I think when she did that interview, she was like 70 years old in 2008.
You are the reason why the life was taken away from a 14-year-old child, and you lived the full life yourself. You had the opportunity to go and have kids, to be happy, so on and so forth, divorce the husband that's been abusing you, yada, 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 and you've lived with this guilt your entire life, but somehow in living with this guilt your entire life, you still managed to buy pearls and fancy red dresses. I don't understand how you took that long to confess. But in the same sense, she lived through, being the long life that she lived through both the times when African American men and women were absolutely hated by everybody, all the way through the stages to the point in time where African American men and women were accepted by almost everybody. And I say almost everybody because there is still obviously racism in the world. And there would have been, without me being able to look at a timeline of all of the events that happened between 1955 and 2018 and saying like, yeah, this would have been the best year for you to, come out of your shell and say, this is, sorry guys, this is what happened, and taking your consequences from that point forward. I could not imagine living through each and every one of those years based off of a mistake that I made in saying something like that, just trying to, like I said, I don't know what her objective was when she said this, but I can't imagine it was to get Emmett Till killed. She wanted emotion, maybe. She wanted something out of her spouse, I feel like. But after doing it, you have to make a choice. Like, do you want it? Because like you have to keep in mind that she was still oppressed herself. She was a woman. She was living in a culture where women were just above, but around the same level as African American people themselves. She didn't have the bravery either to be able to stand up to a white man and say, hey, you killed him and I know it and I'm going to prosecute you, because guess what would have probably happened? They still would have been innocent and she would have disappeared too, just like several of the witnesses that came up and said something disappeared. So it's not something that I can directly blame her for, because I can't imagine, like, there's some tough lies that I imagine other people hold that they're still holding to themselves, because holding it to themselves is a much smaller impact than it would be letting it out to the world, because that would be huge, rather than just keeping it to themselves and leaving things the way that they are. And like I said, living day to day in the environment that it would be very difficult to pick a time says, yes, this is the best time to come out. And I can't imagine she wasn't thinking about it the entire time. Because, like I say, I don't think that it was her original intent, her purpose, to have Emmett Till killed. But after realizing, holy crap, this is what happened. Emmett Till is dead now, and brutally so. What do? I don't think I would have said anything either. But she, and a lot of the articles that I read said that her admission on her deathbed was her attempt to go to heaven, was her trying to get rid of that last sin that she created, because she tried to live for a bigger purpose, and that's the one thing she could never quite come out about. That she, as long as she did it on her deathbed, she was okay. She let the world know. I don't think that was the purpose at all. I think when she had nothing left to lose, she was more than willing to tell the truth. Right. Because at that point, there's, what's going to happen? You're going to kill me? Like, you're going to put me in prison to die there in the next 10 minutes? Like, there's nothing else that could have gone wrong for her. And I think, honestly speaking, in her mind, she's perfectly content with the fact, if she believes in God or heaven or hell, that she may be in hell for the rest of her life. I think she's perfectly okay with that. I still can't say that I'm on her side, though, because that's just too big of a F up for you to let go because of the fact that you just couldn't open your mouth at some point. In closing, I would say that it doesn't matter as far as the case. You already know my standpoint on the case because I've been talking about it this entire time. But as far as moving forward, understand that whether you're black, purple, green, or brown, your people are the people that are the humans have these capabilities. It could have very easily been white people that were oppressed and black people that were on top. It could have very easily been
100%.
It's just a matter of how events broke down in the world,
Right.
that it so happened that black people were the ones on the bottom. And honestly speaking, it was mainly because the African-American man was seen to be stronger, so they could do work
Right.
for longer. That was a huge part of the reason why African-Americans were enslaved. But anyway, living life every day, understanding that people, period, are capable of these things. And just because the times have moved forward 50 some years doesn't mean that people have become less capable. As a matter of fact, I would think they are more capable now, especially with the events that took place on 9/11, which they weren't racism driven even. But imagine if that event was racism driven and they attacked African-American communities intentionally. You know what I mean? So find a bigger purpose, find something bigger to believe in, whether it's a God, whether it's just the next day. Find a bigger purpose, for a reason for you to be nice, to be good, to be hopeful. Because human beings aren't inherently good. We all have I'd say we're about 50% good and 50% bad. We just all either find our reasons or don't find our reasons to be good and to live a good life for the next day. And I would encourage, based off of this case and many other things that have happened in U.S. history and history period, encourage people to find that one thing that they can move on into the next day and say, you know what, last night or today or tomorrow aren't going to be that bad. They weren't that bad. I can get past this type deal. Because if you sulk in it, it's just gonna get you adrenaline pumped and out there to do something else that's gonna make a ginormous impact in the world, just like Emmett Till's murder did.
I'm sorry, Dad. I just want to inject one more thing, because Vontae did bring up a good point about, the fact that she did end up living through not only the things, black people being completely oppressed, but then she lived up until the point that people, black people had rights, and they were making something of themselves. And I almost I don't know if this is true, but it almost helps me to believe that maybe the fact that she carried that secret for all the way through that, maybe that was enough of a punishment to see black people come up. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that helps me to sleep at night, just to know that, yes, she kept this secret, but she also had to live through seeing black men, women, and children all come up to honestly, up to the level that white people did. We can vote, we can drive cars, we can do the things that, hold jobs, all that stuff. Like, we're not out there in 2018 picking cotton. You know what I'm saying? So I almost feel like that, even if it wasn't enough punishment, I think it was definitely a slap in the face for her.
All right, so I don't want to leave this podcast on a whole lot of negativity. So what I want to do, and then I'm going to give you my closing statements and we'll be done, is this. I want to give you a couple or a few things that Emmett Till's death brought on with his legacy and a few honors he has and how it kind of changed us as a world. So a statue, and maybe some of this is stuff that nobody knows, but a statue was unveiled in Denver in 1976, and it has since been moved to Pueblo, Colorado, and it features Emmett Till alongside Martin Luther King Jr. In 1984, a section of the 71st Street in Chicago was named the Emmett Till Road, and in 2005, the 71st Street Bridge was named in his honor. In 1989, Till was included among the 40 names of people who had died in the Civil Rights Movement. They are listed as martyrs on the granite sculpture of the Civil Rights Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama. A demonstration for Till was held in 2000 in Selma, Alabama on the 35th anniversary of the march over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. His mother, Mamie Till Mobley, attended and later wrote in her memoirs, "I realized that Emmett had achieved the significant impact in death that he had been denied in life. Even so, I had never wanted Emmett to be a martyr. I only wanted him to be a good son. Although I realized all the great things that had been accomplished largely because of the sacrifices made by so many people, I found myself wishing that somehow we could have done it another way." In 2005, James McCosh Elementary School in Chicago, where Till had been a student, was renamed the Emmett Lewis Till Math and Science Academy. And in 2006, the Emmett Till Memorial Highway was dedicated between Greenwood and Tutwiler, Mississippi. This was the route his body had taken to the train station to be returned to his mother for burial in Chicago. And then the last thing I'll read to you is this. It says, we, the citizens of Tallahatchie County, recognize that the Emmett Till case was a terrible miscarriage of justice. We state candidly and with deep regret the failure of effectively pursue justice. We wish to say to the family of Emmett Till that we are profoundly sorry for what was done in this community to your loved one. Now, there's many other accolades and stuff that I will have links for on the website. You guys can go check out. But here's how I feel in closing. Yes, I was very upset that when I found out that she lied. I totally understand the reason behind the domestic violence thing, but I just could not get away from the fact that somebody died. Like Devontae said, she had the right to live a full life. She could have kids. She could do whatever she wanted to do. Grief is a SOB. My grandmother was killed in the early 70s in Waycross by a white dude who got away with it in the same situation. They said that he only barely tapped her, but threw my grandmother 80 feet in the air and drug her another 85 feet more. You can't just tap a person like that. But the man grieved to death because he had to see my mom every day when she had to go to the local store, which is the Piggly Wiggly, and he saw her. He was so grief-stricken that he delivered flowers to my grandmother's funeral and always said he was sorry whenever he saw my mother. I think she was going through the same thing. Yes, like Devontae said, she had nothing else to lose. But for some people, that's just a lot to deal with, to have to die on your conscience. I couldn't do that. You know, even if I don't go to heaven, I got to let somebody know, hey, man, look, I know the boy's gone, but this is why, because I said something that wasn't true. I think what we need to take from the Emmett Till case is this. In 2018, we should be trying to live more as a people. Race should be something that's way behind the curve. When you meet a person, the color of his or her skin should not be the first thing that you see. Me and Geneva discussed this because I won't name any names, but it was posted on the Facebook page that my ethnicity was challenged. That I'm not proud to be a black man because my wife is white. Well, I tell everybody this. I'm proud of the fact that I have 6 children. They're all interracially married. I'm married to a white woman right now. The 2 kids you see on the screen is also interracial relationships because they were raised that you don't look at somebody because of their skin. I didn't marry my wife because she was white, or if she would have been black and still the same person she is, I would have married her then. If she was green or purple, I would have married her then. This whole case is because of the fear of a race that we should have no fear about. If we get to know who the person is that we're talking to, there would be no reason to fear that person. But we can learn from that person, and maybe some of these deaths will stop. It still happens in 2018. You've seen the Trayvon Martin cases and all the other cases that's going on now. When we decide that we want to put race behind us and become a people is when healing in this world is going to start to happen. So I do want to say rest in peace to Emmett Till. This case will always get brought up. It was a very important one for us to cover. I want to thank my boy Devontae for joining us today. There's a little longer podcast because we did have 3 people here. Also, I didn't tell you, but of course, this is also episode number 8. So we thank you guys for tuning in to this episode. And hopefully it's true crime, but maybe the next one will be a little bit lighter than this one. So I know it seems like since you started this podcast, like all of our episodes, right, it's just like
it gets more and more
hard.
depressing
every
week.
It is like we try, people. We really try to go through all these cases and say, man, which one we gonna do? But all of them, has their damnation somewhere. So with that being said, please make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms here at the end of the show. To our patrons that we still have out there, we still appreciate you guys very much, and we thank you. Anybody else who is enjoying the show, we do actually go over and think about donating to us through Patreon. We've added a few more things to that for your tiers. Plus, you get to hear us do cases that we don't do here. Some are true crime, some are not. We've got 2 cases over there right now that you guys may want to check out. And that's it, guys. So until next time, as always, don't commit any crimes out there,
so you don't end up on our podcast.